Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Becky and today we are going to work on the video that I promised a little while ago, which is comparing a bunch of different types of gouache. The first thing I need to do though is get out my Miya Himi Gouache. I haven't used it in a while and it has dried out a little bit, so I need to revive it, and so I was going to just show you what I do to revive it. So let's go ahead and switch over so you can see what I'm doing. All right, to start with, you can see how things are. You can see some of the sorry, focus. Not gonna focus. All right. You can see some of the gouaches are a little dried out, and some of them actually look really nice. So what I do to revive them is just simply take some water and spray them. And the ones that are looking extra dry, I spray extra water in. And I usually let them sit for a little bit and let that water do its magic, because quite often the water will do a lot of the work for you. There we go. You can see here that it's a lot less clumpy than it was, but it's still pretty sticky. That means it needs a little bit more water. And it's doing the clumping thing again, where it's just sticking all to the knife. It does it every time you add more water. It'll clump together to start with, and then after you mix it for a little bit, it gets dispersed throughout the paint, and then it's happy again. Sometimes the paint gets really chunky. You can see here that it's really just kind of really chunky here. Just means it's dried out a little bit more. It seems like some of the colors maybe dry out a little bit faster than others. It might have something to do with how close to the edge that they are. It does seem like the ones around the edge dry out faster, because this lid doesn't fit as snugly as I would like it to. So air definitely does get up in there and can dry the paints out. But because they are not acrylic gouache, they can absolutely just be revived with more water. It just means a little bit more work, a little bit more water, and you're good to go. Okay, I have finished restoring this Miya Himi jelly gouache, and it looks a lot better, as maybe you can see. It really doesn't take that much effort, but the one trick that I would give to anyone who has some jelly gouache that has dried out a little bit is to spray it and let it sit. Even if you spray it and let it sit overnight, that's going to really make it a lot easier for you to restore it. And you might have to add more water than you would expect, but don't go too crazy with it, because then you're going to water it down, and then it's going to be more of that watercolor consistency rather than the thicker gouache consistency, and so you're not going to get as much coverage. So I like to make it a little bit sticky, so when I put my palette knife in, you can see a little bit of a trail, but I don't like a big thick tendril, because I just don't like it that thick. So kind of play with it. It's up to you. The one thing that I really like about the Himi gouache is that it is ready to go most of the time. If I'm using it regularly, I can just open it up and give it a quick spritz, and I'm ready to go. And I don't have to mess around with getting out the tubes and setting up a palette and that sort of thing. And gouache dries relatively quickly, so this doesn't dry as quickly because it's in these bigger cups, but just kind of spritz it and you're good to go. And that's really nice. All right, I've created this test piece of paper so I can just kind of play with the gouaches a little bit and show you how they apply and how easy it is to get a wash and that sort of thing. So I'm going to start with the Himi gouache here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick a color. This is straight out of the palette there, and I'm just going to go ahead and try and apply it. And you can see that spreads pretty well. You can see I get a little bit of that part where the paper is showing through a little bit as I drag it across. If I take a little bit of that paint and just dip my brush in water and mix it in there, you can get a much more fluid. This is maybe a little bit more than a milky consistency, and you can spread that paint so much nicer. But you can see that if you add too much water, it gets really transparent. So I'm going to go ahead and pull some more paint in there to make it so that it's a little bit more opaque. And that's maybe a little bit better consistency. That's still a little bit milky. Definitely not a gouache expert. There we go. You can see that's a little bit more opaque. And so, you know, I can do things where I'm just kind of pulling it down. And if I want to add a little bit more water as I go down, I can make it get more and more transparent. And that's how you can get some of these really nice effects where if you want like a really light version of the paint down at the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of blend it back up. And you get a much smoother look. So nice easy way to kind of test a couple of things with the paint. And I will do the same thing with each of the Royal & Langnickel and the Winsor & Newton paint. Just kind of give you an idea of how it looks when it comes straight out of the tube, and how it looks if you water it down a little bit. Like I said, I watered it down a little bit too much here, but this is not too bad, and you get kind of the idea of the transparency as it comes down. So rather than trying to do a whole bunch of different tests on a piece of paper that doesn't amount to anything, I thought the best way to test each of these paints would be to actually paint something. And for each of the different paints, the Miya Himi Gouache, the Royal & Langnickel, and the Winsor & Newton paints, I'm going to paint mushrooms. I'm going to paint the fly agaric, which is the mushroom that you think of when you think of a mushroom. It's the one with the red cap and the white spots. Just simply because I like the look of them and I thought they would make really nice paintings. I'm starting off here by blocking in the colors for the painting. You see I blocked in just kind of a bunch of different greens for the background, and I didn't blend that really well, but that was on purpose. I wanted the background to kind of look blurry, and then I'm just putting in the red for each of the mushroom tops, and then I will put in the stem color in a little bit. Here I decided to try and do a technique that is called lifting, and I'm doing these things called bokeh lights or bokeh lights, B-O-K-E-H. I'm not sure how to actually pronounce that, but the idea is that it's you can kind of see this blurry effect of light poking through like leaves and things like that. I think it ended up kind of looking like fireflies, so that's what I went with. But the way that I'm doing it is I'm just dampening my brush and then kind of rubbing it over and wiping it off as I pull some of the color up. And this was just kind of to see how well the gouache reacts with doing that. And this reacts pretty well. You can see that it does stain the paper a little bit, but that was expected. I'm also lifting a little bit of color up on the mushrooms here to put in a little bit of more of an orange or like a highlight color on them. And on the little mushroom, I'm actually, instead of lifting, I'm doing more of just a little bit of a glaze over top. So I'm just adding that color over top just to kind of see how well it works, how much it reactivates the paint underneath. Another thing, I'm putting the white dots right over top of the red paint, and that's again just trying out the layering to see how much you'll be able to actually see the paint underneath through. In general, when you're using gouache, you can put a thicker paint over top of a thinner paint without worrying about reactivating. And with the little dots of color, it's not that big of a deal because I'm not rubbing it a lot. But if you're using more of a rubbing technique, then you're going to end up lifting some of the color underneath. Definitely you see that with the Himi gouache. I will see how much that actually happens with the other gouaches. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I really like about the jelly gouaches and the Himi gouache is that the colors are right there and ready to go. I can just open it up and just go. I don't have to worry about setting anything up. I don't have to worry about squeezing paint out, that sort of thing. The one downside is that the colors do dry out if you don't use it a lot. with working with it. But if you are in a hurry and want to work with them and they've dried out a bit, it's going to take you a little bit. For each of the cups, you're going to have to put some water in and really mix it up. And sometimes they get pretty dry, and it's going to take a lot of work to mix that color. You could use it like a dry watercolor, where you're just kind of lifting some of the color off of a hard or dry gouache. That is a thing that you can do. I haven't tried that with the Himi gouaches. I don't know how well that would work, but I do know that some people will buy two gouache and put it into a palette and then use it as a dry gouache, and it does work. Overall, I do enjoy using the Himi gouaches. They are not light fast, so if I wanted this to be something that I sold, then I would feel a little bit bad about selling someone this because it is not light fast, which just means that if it is in the sunlight, the colors are going to fade over time. I haven't done any tests on this, though I have seen some some gouache people online doing some light fastness tests on it, and the colors do seem to hold up fairly well, like over a year's worth of time. So just so you know, that is true. These would be great if I wanted to paint and then make prints of them or something like that, because then the prints, can be made of a higher quality so that it'd be light fast. But at the moment, I'm not planning on selling any of these paintings or any of the originals anyway, so I'm not terribly worried about the fact that it's not light fast. That doesn't bother me at all. And for the price, it's really hard to beat. So I don't know if you noticed, but throughout the video, more and more washi tape ended up around the outside of the paper. That was because it kept warping and wanting to pull off this. I've got this plastic board that I've got it attached to. It just kept wanting to pull off there, so I kept putting more tape on in order to keep it down. I think that is more to do with the quality of the paper that I'm using. I'm just using some Canson watercolor paper than the gouache itself. But we'll see when I actually go and use some of the other gouaches whether that happens with them or not. This is the moment we've all been waiting for, peeling that tape back to see that beautiful line. The tape peels pretty well here. I did have some issues because I put so much tape on there, and I do have a couple of issues in peeling it off, and a few spots where a lot of paint ended up on top, but overall it peels pretty well. So I'm just going to leave you in silence for a little bit while you watch that, and then I'll come back in a few minutes. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's video. I know I enjoyed making it for you. Next week I'm going to be back and doing the Royal & Langnickel gouache again with another mushroom painting. If you did like it, please give it a like and think about subscribing. I really appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great week. In a minute here after the tape peeling, I'm just going to show you some of the final results.